Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something fundamental, something we experience almost constantly, hearing. And our guide for this journey is a really significant text in the field. Hearing, an introduction to Psychological and Physiological Acoustics, 5th edition by Stanley A. Gelfand. Now, this is definitely not light reading. It's incredibly comprehensive.
Oh, absolutely. Gelfand's book really covers the whole spectrum, the anatomy, the physiology, how the ear actually works, and then the perception side, too, how we make sense of sound.
Right. It's aimed at, well, a pretty wide audience, isn't it? Grad students, audiologists, psychologists.
Speech pathologists, engineers even.
Yeah.
It's foundational for anyone seriously studying hearing.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to kind of distill this dense knowledge. We want to pull out the most crucial bits, the surprising facts.
And the real takeaways give you a shortcut to understanding how complex and, frankly, amazing hearing is.
And connect it back to your everyday life.
Yeah.
Because Gelfand himself makes a great point. He says, research is always evolving.
Exactly. New information expands on the old, and sometimes it even makes us rethink what we thought we knew for sure.
So think of this deep dive as maybe step one.
Yeah.
An introduction to this dynamic science. Okay, so to really get into hearing, we have to start right at the beginning. The physics of sound itself. Here's where it gets really interesting. How does, a simple vibration become music or speech?
That's the fundamental question. And Gelfand's chapter on physical concepts lays the groundwork beautifully. We have to start with the absolute basics, the fundamental unit.
SI units, right? Meters, kilograms, seconds.
Exactly. Time in seconds, length in meters, mass in kilograms. And it's really important to distinguish mass from weight. People often mix them up.
Yeah, I think I do sometimes.
Well, mass is, how much stuff is in an object. It's constant. Weight depends on gravity's pull on that mass.
So you weigh less on the moon, but your mass is the same?
Precisely. Your mass doesn't change, just the gravitational force acting on it. And from those basic units, mass, length, time, we derive everything else we need for sound.
Like velocity, acceleration.
Force, work, power, and importantly, sound intensity, watts per square meter. It all builds from there.
And it all connects back to Newton's laws, doesn't it? Inertia, force.
Absolutely. Inertia, Newton's first law, is just that property of mass to resist changes in motion. Things at rest stay at rest. Things in motion keep moving, unless a force acts on them.
And force is that push or pull.
Right. Force causes acceleration, a change in speed or direction. F equals ma, Newton's second law. And when forces balance out, the net force is zero, you get equilibrium, no change in motion.
But okay, in the real world, things do slow down. You roll a ball, it stops.
Right, and that's not violating the laws, it's just friction. Or resistance. It's an opposing force.
Yeah.
It depends on the surfaces involved. Think ice versus sandpaper, that's the coefficient of friction, and it depends on motion itself.
Like rubbing your hands together generates heat.
Perfect example. You're converting motion energy into thermal energy because of friction. That's energy dissipation. Sound waves lose energy the same way as they travel.
Okay, so measuring sound. We always hear about decibels. dB. Why is that scale used? It seems kind of abstract.
It is, but it's incredibly useful. The decibel, or dB, is logarithmic. And that's key because the range of sound intensities we can hear is enormous, absolutely vast.
From like a pin drop to a jet engine.
Exactly. If we used a linear scale for intensity, the numbers would be ridiculously large and unwieldy. The decibel scale compresses this range. The formula for intensity level is 10 times the log of the ratio of the sound's intensity to a standard reference intensity.
Which is tiny, right? 10 to the minus 12 watts per square meter.
That's the one, I0. So for example, a sound at 10 to the minus 10 watts per square meter works out to 20 dBIL. It makes the numbers manageable, and importantly, it actually reflects how our perception of loudness works, which is also logarithmic, not linear.
So a 10 dB increase isn't just a little bit louder in physical terms.
No, it's a tenfold increase in intensity. But perceptually, it feels like a roughly doubling of loudness. The scale matches our experience quite well.
Okay, so we have the units, the forces. How does that become a sound wave traveling to our ear? What's happening with, like, the air molecules?
Right, let's think about vibrations. A tuning fork is the classic example. You strike it, that force displaces the prongs, elasticity wants to pull them back to rest.
But they overshoot.
Exactly, because of inertia. Then elasticity pulls them back the other way. Inertia causes another overshoot. It's a cycle, simple harmonic motion, until the energy dissipates due to, well, friction and radiating sound.
And the prongs move opposite each other.
Yes, as mirror images. Now, that back and forth motion bumps into nearby air molecules. Those molecules bump into their neighbors and so on. The vibration propagates outwards. But here's the crucial bit Gelfand emphasizes. Each molecule stays in its own general location and moves to and fro about this average position.
So the air itself isn't flowing to my ear, it's the pattern of vibration.
Precisely. It's the transmission of that vibratory pattern. You get areas where molecules are momentarily squeezed together, compressions, and areas where they're pulled apart, rarefactions. This alternating pattern radiates out as the sound wave.
And wavelength is?
The distance covered by one full cycle of that wave, from one compression peak to the next, for example, and it's inversely proportional to frequency. High frequency, short wavelength. Low frequency, long wavelength.
Which makes sense why low bass sounds seem to fill a space more.
Yes, longer waves interact differently with obstacles and room boundaries.
Okay, but we usually hear complex sounds, not just pure tones like a tuning fork. What happens when waves combine?
Good question. A pure tone is just a single sine wave. If you combine two identical sine waves that are perfectly in phase, their peaks and troughs line up, their amplitudes just add together.
Reinforcement, louder.
Right. But if you combine sine waves of different frequencies, you get complex periodic waves. They're not simple sinusoids anymore, but they still repeat over time. This is what gives instruments and voices their unique timbre or quality.
Like building a square wave from odd harmonics.
That's a classic example Gelfand uses. You add the third, fifth, seventh harmonic and so on, and the wave shape gets progressively more square.
Interesting. And standing waves, they seem like they're not moving at all.
They're a result of wave interference, often reflection. Think of a guitar string fixed at both ends. When it vibrates, waves travel back and forth, interfering. At certain frequencies, you get patterns that look stationary. You have points of no movement, the nodes, and points of maximum movement, the antinodes.
And the fundamental frequency is the simplest pattern.
Yes, the first mode of vibration. It's the longest possible standing wave, where the string length is exactly half a wavelength. The same principle applies to air columns in pipes, like organs or flutes. You get pressure nodes and antinodes. Understanding these vibrations is key to how instruments work and how sound interacts with structures like our ear canal.
Okay, last physics concept before the ear itself.
Mm-hmm.
Impedance. Sounds technical.
It is a bit, but it's fundamental to understanding sound transmission, especially into the ear. Impedance, symbol Z, is the opposition to the flow of energy through a system. Think of it as how hard it is to get something vibrating.
Measured in ohms, like electrical resistance.
Yes, same unit. It's defined as the ratio of force to velocity, Z equals FV. And it has three components. There's resistance, R, which is like friction, dissipating energy. Then there's mass reactance, XM, related to the object's mass resisting acceleration. And stiffness reactance, X's, related to elasticity resisting displacement, like trying to push a heavy object mass attached to a stiff spring, stiffness, across a rough surface resistance.
Okay, so impedance determines how easily sound energy travels.
Exactly. And as we'll see, the ear has to deal with a massive impedance difference between air and the fluid inside.
Right. So let's move into the ear. What's fascinating here is how these physical principles we just discussed play out in the ear's design.
It's truly remarkable. The ear is actively processing and transforming sound from the moment it arrives.
Starting with the outer ear, the pinna, it's more than just catching sound. Right?
Oh, much more. The pinna, with all its bumps and ridges, acts as a complex filter, especially for high frequencies, say above 4,000 hertz or so. How it filters depends on the sound's direction, up, down, front, back.
So it gives us directional cues. Helps us know where a sound is coming from vertically.
Precisely. It provides cues for elevation and front-back localization, contributing to what's called extracranialization, making sound feel like it's truly out there. It's especially important for sounds right in front or behind you, or if you're only using one ear. Those complex reflections off the pinna are vital spatial information.
And the ear canal, just a tube.
Not just any tube, it's a resonant tube, open at one end, the entrance, and closed at the other, the eardrum. Like blowing across the top of a bottle, it resonates. Its length, about 2.3 centimeters in humans, means it resonates most strongly around 3,800 hertz.
So it amplifies certain frequencies.
Yes, it boosts mid to high frequencies. Gelfand states it can add as much as about 15 dBs at the eardrum compared to the sound field. But because the canal isn't a perfect, rigid tube, its walls are soft and irregular, the resonance peak isn't super sharp. It's broadened, usually enhancing sounds from about 2,000 to 5,000 hertz, a natural amplifier for important speech frequencies.
Okay, so the sound is funneled and boosted. Then it hits the eardrum, and that's where the impedance problem really hits, right? Air versus the fluid in the inner ear.
Exactly. This is the major hurdle. Gelfand uses the analogy of air versus seawater. Air offers much less impedance. The impedance ratio between air and the cochlear fluid is staggering, approximately 4,000.1.
Wow. So without help, almost no sound would get through.
Practically none. Only about 0.1% of the energy would transfer. That's like a 40 dB loss. Most sounds would be inaudible.
Which is why the middle ear is so critical. It's the impedance matching transformer.
Perfectly put. It bridges that huge gap, and it does it through three clever mechanisms working together.
Okay, what are they?
First, the area ratio. The eardrum, the tympanic membrane, has a much larger surface area than the tiny oval window where the stapes bone pushes into the inner ear. Think of concentrating force onto a smaller point, like a hydraulic press. This area difference alone provides significant pressure amplification, maybe a factor of 20 or so.
Okay, one down.
Second, the curved membrane mechanism. Helmholtz pointed this out. The eardrum isn't flat, it's cone-shaped. Because it's attached firmly at the edges but connected to the malleus bone more centrally, it buckles slightly when sound hits it, acting like a lever. This lever action provides another boost in force, maybe a factor of 2. It's subtle but effective.
Right, makes sense. And the third?
The ossicular lever. The first two middle ear bones, the malleus and the incus, form a lever system. The malleus acts as the longer lever arm, the incus is the shorter one. This gives a mechanical advantage, typically around 1.3 to 1 in humans.
So you multiply these three factors together.
Exactly. The area ratio times the curved membrane factor times the ossicular lever factor, and you get enough amplification to effectively overcome that massive impedance mismatch. It's an incredibly efficient natural machine.
Amazing engineering in such a tiny space. What else is in that middle ear cavity?
Well, it's an air-filled space connected to the back of the throat via the eustachian tube.
Ah, the tube that pops on airplanes.
That's the one. Its job is twofold. First, equalize the air pressure on both sides of the eardrum, vital for preventing pressure buildup or vacuum. Second, it allows drainage of any fluid from the middle ear into the nasopharynx, helps keep it healthy.
Makes sense. And there are muscles in there too, tiny ones.
Two tiny muscles, yes. The stapedius attached to the stapes and the tensor tympani attached to the malleus. They're encased in bone, only their tendons emerge. When they contract, they increase the stiffness of the ossicular chain.
And they work together even though they pull differently.
Yes, Gelfand calls them synergists with respect to hearing because their net effect is to lessen energy conduction, particularly for loud sounds.
Which leads to the acoustic reflex.
Right. That's the involuntary contraction of primarily the stapedius muscle in humans in response to intense sound. The tensor tympani usually only joins in for extreme sounds, part of a startle response.
Is it instant?
No, there's a delay, a latency. It gets shorter as the sound gets louder, but it's not immediate, maybe 150 milliseconds down to 40 milliseconds. It also shows temporal summation, meaning a longer loud sound triggers it more easily than a short burst of the same intensity.
And it weakens over time if the sound stays loud.
Yes, that's adaptation. The reflex fatigues, especially for higher frequencies.
So what's its main effect? Protection.
That's a major theory. By stiffening the chain, it reduces sound transmission, especially for low frequencies, maybe by 20-40 dBs below 500 Hz. Other ideas are that it helps optimize hearing and noise, keeps the ossicles positioned correctly, or maybe even enhances attention. Its exact purpose is likely multifaceted.
And quickly bone conduction, bypassing all this.
Right. Sound can vibrate the skull directly, transmitting energy straight to the inner ear. Beckezy showed the skull vibrates differently at different frequencies as a whole unit below 200 Hz, but in segments at higher frequencies. It's another pathway for sound to reach the cochlea.
Okay, fascinating journey through the outer and middle ear. Now we arrive at the inner ear, the cochlea. This is where the real conversion happens, right? Mechanical to electrical. So what does this all mean for how we actually hear?
This is the core of it. The inner ear sits within the bony labyrinth, deep in the temporal bone. Inside that is the membranous labyrinth, filled with fluids, paralymph and endolymph. Their different chemical compositions are crucial and maintained locally.
And the hearing organ itself is the organ of Corti.
Exactly. It runs along the basilar membrane inside the cochlea. Think of it like the sensor strip. It has two main types of sensory cells. The inner hair cells, IHCs, about 3,500 in a single row. They are the primary receptors sending signals to the brain. And then the outer hair cells, OHCs, about 12,000 in 3 rows. They play a different, more active role, as we'll see.
Separated by the tunnel of Corti.
Right. And hovering over them is the tectorial membrane, a gelatinous structure. And on top of the hair cells are the stereocilia, tiny hair-like structures. They're stiff and bend at their base when stimulated.
And that bending is the key mechanical event.
That's the trigger. The stereocilia are arranged precisely, W-shaped on OHCs, U-shaped on IHCs, and connected by tiny tip links. That bending pulls those links and opens ion channels.
Okay, so how did scientists first figure out how this structure analyzes frequency? There were different ideas, weren't there? Place versus time?
Yes, a long debate. Helmholtz's place theory proposed that different places along the basilar membrane resonated at different frequencies, like piano strings. Location was key.
And the temporal theory?
Rutherford's telephone theory suggested the cochlea just transmitted the whole waveform, like a microphone, and the brain figured out the frequency based on the timing of nerve impulses.
So who was right?
Turns out both were partly right. Gelfand emphasizes the combined approach. We now know both mechanisms are operative. Place coding is dominant for high frequencies. Temporal coding, or phase locking, is crucial for low frequencies. And in the large mid-frequency range, say 300 Hz to 4 to 5 kHz, both mechanisms contribute. The brain uses all the information it can get.
And Georg von Békésy's traveling wave theory explained the place part, how the basilar membrane actually moves. That won him a Nobel Prize.
It did, and it revolutionized the field. Békésy showed that a pressure wave travels down the cochlea from base to apex, regardless of the stimulus frequency. This happens because the basilar membrane isn't uniform, it has a stiffness gradient. It's much stiffer in the base, near the stakes, and gets progressively more flexible towards the apex.
Like a flipper, stiff at one end, floppy at the other.
Sort of. This gradient means high frequencies cause maximum vibration near the stiff base, and the wave dies out quickly. Low frequencies travel further down towards the flexible apex, creating a wave that peaks there.
So the peak location signals the frequency.
Exactly. The envelope of the traveling wave shows this peak location clearly. Low frequencies displace more of the membrane, high frequencies displace less, closer to the base. And crucially, this traveling wave causes a shearing motion, a side-to-side bending of the stereocilia right at the peak of the wave. That's what stimulates the hair cells.
Okay, so the stereocilia bend. How does that mechanical bending turn into an electrical signal the brain understands? Mechanotransduction.
Right. This is the critical conversion. When the stereocilia bend, those tip links physically pull open ion channels, transduction pores, at their tips. Positively charged ions, mainly potassium, K+, and some calcium, Ca2+, rush into the hair cell from the surrounding endolymph fluid. This is the transduction current.
Makes the inside of the cell less negative.
Yes, it depolarizes the cell. This initial depolarization triggers voltage-gated calcium channels to open, letting in more calcium. And that influx of calcium is the final signal telling the hair cell to release neurotransmitter onto the auditory nerve fiber connected to it. Boom signal sent to the brain.
And we can actually measure electrical activity from the cochlea, these cochlear potentials.
We can. The cochlear microphonic CM is a big one. It's an AC potential that mirrors the waveform of the sound stimulus. It's generated primarily by the outer hair cells as their stereocilia bend back and forth, modulating the flow of ions. Davis's model describes it as the resting potentials acting like batteries and the hair cell movement changing the resistance.
So the CM reflects the mechanical vibration.
Very closely. And interestingly, the CM recorded from the round window mainly reflects activity from the basal high-frequency end of the cochlear. Then there's the summating potential, SP. This is a DC shift, not AC. It's also mainly from OHCs, but IHCs contribute a bit too. These potentials give us a window into the cochlea's electrical functioning.
You mentioned the OHCs having an active role, and Gelfand talks about nonlinearity. The cochlea isn't just passive.
Absolutely not. This is one of the biggest discoveries. Rhodes showed the basilar membrane's response is nonlinear. Its tuning isn't fixed, it changes with sound level. This nonlinearity is essential for our hearing range and sensitivity, and it's driven by the cochlear amplifier.
An amplifier inside the cochlea.
Yes, an active biological amplifier. It enhances the vibration, sharpens the tuning, especially for low-level sounds, and it's powered by the outer hair cells through outer hair cell electron motility. OHCs can physically change their length, contract, and expand rapidly in response to electrical changes caused by the incoming sound. This active motor function pumps energy back into the basilar membrane vibration, amplifying it. It's an incredible feedback system.
And this active process actually creates sounds that come back out of the ear, otoacoustic emissions.
Exactly. Yeah. Otoacoustic emissions, OAEs, are faint sounds generated by the cochlea's active process, primarily the OHC motility, that travel back through the middle ear and can be measured in the ear canal. The Kemp echo.
A real echo from your own ear.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is. And their timing fits the traveling wave theory. Higher frequency OAEs have shorter delays because they originate closer to the base.
And distortion product OAEs, DPOAEs.
Those occur due to the cochlea's nonlinearity. If you put in two tones, F1 and F2, the cochlea generates distortion products, like the 2F1 F2 cubic difference tone. Measuring these DPOAEs is another way to assess OHC function and the health of the cochlear amplifier. It's direct evidence of those active nonlinear processes at work.
Okay, so the inner ear has done its magic, amplified, transduced. Now the signal heads to the brain via the auditory nerve. What happens there?
The auditory nerve is the bottleneck, the main highway carrying all this information. Individual nerve fibers show characteristic firing patterns. A typical response to a tone, shown in a PST histogram, has an initial sharp peak, the onset response, and then it adapts, settling down to a lower, steady firing rate, and then activity drops below baseline when the tone stops.
So the timing carries information too. How is frequency coded? Still place and time.
Yes, both. Place codings, which fiber is firing, based on its cochlear origin, is always there. But temporal coding, or phase locking, is also crucial, especially below about 5 kHz. Nerve fibers tend to fire in sync with a particular phase of the sound wave cycle. The timing of spikes carries frequency information, so both mechanisms contribute to frequency coding. We also see two-tone suppression. Firing in response to one tone can be reduced, suppressed, by adding a second tone, especially one slightly higher in frequency. It sharpens the nerve's tuning.
Can we measure the whole nerve's activity?
Yes, the whole nerve action potential, AP, often just called the AP, it's a synchronized burst of firing, mainly the N1 peak, usually seen with clicks or abrupt sounds. It's mostly generated by the basal high-frequency turn of the cochlea because the traveling wave is fastest there, leading to synchronous firing.
And how does the nerve represent loudness?
Yes.
More fibers firing.
Partly, yes. We can see this with across fiber tuning curves. A low-level tone activates only fibers tuned precisely to its frequency. But as intensity increases, that tone starts activating many more fibers, including those tuned to other frequencies, especially via their less sensitive tails. So more fibers fire, and they fire faster, up to a point.
Okay, nerve sends the signal up. Central auditory nervous system, CANS. Does the frequency map stay organized?
Remarkably so. Tonotopic organization persists throughout the central pathways, starting in the cochlear nuclei in the brainstem. High frequencies map to one area, low frequencies to another. It's like a frequency map layered in the brain.
But the neuron responses get more complex than in the nerve.
Much more diverse. You see neurons with different patterns. Pausers that fire, stop, then fire again. Build-up units that slowly increase their firing rate. It reflects increasingly complex processing at each stage.
And this is where binaural processing starts, using two ears for location.
Yes, crucial structures like the superior olivary complex, SOC, in the brainstem begin comparing inputs from both ears. Neurons there are specifically tuned to interal time differences, ITDs, and interoral level differences, ILDs.
The tiny time and loudness differences between the ears.
Exactly. Some cells, like in the medial superior olive, MSO, act like coincidence detectors, firing maximally when inputs arrive with a specific time delay. Others respond strongly to level differences. This neural machinery computes sound location.
Can we see this processing non-invasively? Auditory evoked potentials.
Yes, AEPs recorded from the scalp reflect activity at different levels. The middle latency response, MLR, reflects early cortical and subcortical activity. Later potentials reflect more cognitive aspects. The contingent negative variation, CNV, shows up when you're expecting a sound or need to respond to it. The mismatched negativity, MMN, is fascinating. It's an automatic brain response to an unexpected oddball sound in a sequence, even if you're not paying attention. A pre-attentive change detector.
Wow. And the ASSR, auditory steady-state response.
The ASSR is evoked by periodically modulated sounds, like a tone whose amplitude fluctuates regularly. The brain's electrical response actually locks onto that modulation frequency. It has considerable frequency specificity, making it great for testing hearing thresholds objectively, especially in infants. It reflects the brain tracking the ongoing rhythm of the sound.
Okay, we've gone from physics through the ear and up the nerve pathways.
Yeah.
Now let's talk perception. How do we experience all this? What stands out to you about how our brains interpret these complex signals?
What's truly remarkable is how the brain takes this stream of neural data and organizes it into a coherent perceptual world, distinguishing sounds, locating them, understanding speech. It's psychoacoustics. First, we need ways to measure perception. Gelfand discusses scales of measurements. Some are just ordinal ranking things like better or worse without equal intervals. But ratio scales like loudness in sones or pitch in mells have a true zero and allow meaningful comparisons, like saying one sound is twice as loud as another.
And the goal is to measure pure sensory ability, not just how someone decides to respond.
Exactly. Minimize response proclivity or bias. We distinguish absolute sensitivity, the quietest sound you can hear, from differential sensitivity, the smallest difference you can detect, the J end or DL.
And there are specific methods for this, not just asking, hear that.
Right. Classical methods like the method of limits, alternating ascending trials, or method of adjustment, subject controls the stimulus, have limitations like step size or bias.
So forced choice is better.
Forced choice methods like 2AFC, where you have to choose which interval had the tone, are much better at reducing guessing bias. And adaptive methods like the staircase method or piece are very efficient. They adjust the stimulus level based on your responses, quickly homing in on your threshold, typically the 50% detection point.
But even then, bias can creep in. Is that where signal detection theory comes in?
Precisely. The theory of signal detection, TSD, is designed to effectively separate sensitivity from response proclivity. It acknowledges that deciding, yes, I heard it, involves more than just the sound. It considers the internal noise in your system and your personal decision criterion. Are you cautious or liberal in saying yes?
Using hits, misses, false alarms, correct rejections.
Exactly. By analyzing that pattern, TSD can estimate your true sensitivity, often called D prime or D, independent of your response bias, beta or C. It's a more sophisticated way to understand performance.
Okay, so what do these methods tell us about our basic hearing limits? Absolute sensitivity.
Well, we measure absolute thresholds in two ways: minimum audible field, MAF, in a sound field,
Right.
and minimum audible pressure, MAP, under earphones. Curiously, MAF thresholds are consistently about 610 dBs lower, better than MAP thresholds. The missing 6 dB, still debated exactly why.
And thresholds aren't perfectly smooth. Microstructure.
Right. If you measure very finely, individual thresholds are rippled or jagged. These bumps and dips are real, repeatable, and linked to those active processes in the cochlea, like OAEs, your ear's unique fingerprint.
What about the loud end?
We usually talk about uncomfortable loudness as the upper limit of useful hearing, distinct from the threshold of actual pain.
And clinically, we use audiograms in dBHL.
Yes, dB hearing level uses standardized reference levels, RATSPLs, based on average normal hearing. 0 dBHL is average normal. So 70 dBHL means you need 70 dB more sound pressure than average just to hear it.
And duration matters. Temporal integration.
It does. Our sensitivity improves as a sound gets longer, up to about 200, 300 meters, like collecting energy over time. After that, duration doesn't help threshold much more.
What about detecting differences, differential sensitivity, JNDs?
We're incredibly good at it. For intensity DL, Weber's law, constant ratio, works okay for broadband voids. We can detect changes of less than 1 dB. For pure tones, it's slightly different. We actually get better at detecting small dB changes as the overall level increases.
And frequency changes.
Also very precise, especially at lower frequencies. And gap detection, finding the shortest silent break we can hear. It's amazing only 2-3 meters if the sounds before and after the gap are the same within channel, but much longer, over 20 meters if the sounds differ across channel, requiring more complex comparison.
So processing within one frequency channel is super fast.
Extremely. Determining temporal order, which sound came first, also takes longer if the sounds are different.
Okay, let's talk masking. One sound obscuring another. Very common.
Absolutely fundamental. Masking is when one sound masker raises the threshold for another signal. The amount of masking is the difference between the masked and unmasked threshold. A key finding is the spread of masking. Low frequencies mask high frequencies much more effectively than the other way around, the upward spread of masking. Bass can easily drown out treble.
Why is that?
Mostly due to how the traveling wave works on the basilar membrane. Low frequencies create broad vibration patterns that extend far up towards the high-frequency bass.
And the critical band idea?
The critical bandwidth CB concept suggests masking is most effective when the masker energy falls within a certain frequency range or filter around the signal frequency. Noise outside that band doesn't help mask much. These critical bands get wider at higher frequencies. Gelfand stresses they're like overlapping filters, not discrete boxes.
And ERB is a related measure.
Equivalent rectangular bandwidth, ERB, is a more standardized way to measure the auditory filter width. It also widens with frequency, roughly parallel to, but often narrower than, classical critical bands.
Can we listen around a masker? Off-frequency listening?
Yes, the ear cleverly tunes into the filter with the best signal-to-noise ratio, even if it's slightly off the signal's main frequency. We can map this selectivity with psychoacoustic tuning curves, PTCs, which show sharp tips reflecting the narrow auditory filter.
Does masking happen if sounds aren't simultaneous? Temporal masking.
Yes. Forward masking, masker first, then signal, can last up to 200 meters. Backward masking, signal first, then masker, is weaker, maybe up to 50 meters. The masker can affect sounds nearby in time.
Even across ears. Central masking.
A smaller effect, yes. Noise in one ear can slightly raise the threshold in the other ear, suggesting neural interaction in the brainstem. It's far less than monaural masking.
And informational masking. Not about energy overlap.
Right. Informational masking happens when uncertainty or confusion makes it hard to pick out the signal, even if it's physically audible. Think trying to follow one conversation in a room full of chatter cognitive interference, not just energetic masking.
Wow. So much interference. What about loudness itself? How do we perceive how loud a sound is, not just dB?
We use the Sohn scale for perceived loudness. By definition, one Sohn equal loudness of a 1000 Hz tone at 40 dB. And the key rule of thumb, loudness roughly doubles for every 10 dB increase in intensity. So 50 dB is 2 sounds, 60 dB is 4 sounds. It's a perceptual scale.
Does loudness add up across frequencies?
Yes, through loudness summation. A sound spread across multiple critical bands sounds louder than a sound with the same total energy confined to one critical band. More filters activated, louder perception.
And loudness integrates over time too.
Similar to threshold, yes. Temporal integration of loudness occurs up to about 200, 300 meters. There's also induced loudness reduction, ILR. After listening to a loud sound, a subsequent softer sound seems even quieter. Your system recalibrates.
What about noisiness versus annoyance? Different.
Gelfand makes a clear distinction. Perceived noisiness, measured in noise, or PNDB, is based strictly on the physical sound, its unwantedness based on loudness, frequency, duration. Annoyance includes psychological factors, the meaning of the sound, your attitude towards the source, context. A dripping faucet might not be noisy, but it can be incredibly annoying.
Okay, finally, pitch. The psychological side of frequency, how does that work? The Mel scale.
Yes, the Mel scale quantifies perceived pitch. 1000 Mels is the pitch of 1000 Hertz at 40 forms, but it's not linear. Pitch increases more slowly than frequency, especially at higher frequencies. Doubling frequency doesn't double perceived pitch. For instance, 3000 Hertz is only about 2000 Mels. The scale is compressed.
And beats, when tones are close together.
Right. If two tones are very close, for 1000 Hertz and 1003 Hertz, you don't hear two pitches, but one tone beating in loudness 3 times per second. It reflects the limits of our frequency resolution. As the difference widens, the beating gets faster and turns into roughness.
And combination tones, the ear creating sounds.
Yes, due to that nonlinearity we discussed, the ear generates tones not present in the input, like the F2, F1 difference tone or the 2F1, F2 cubic difference tone. They're real physical vibrations in your cochlea.
How does this relate to music, octaves and stuff?
Musical pitch is based on frequency ratios. An octave is a 2.1 ratio. We distinguish tone height, the low to high quality related to Mels, from chroma, the cyclical quality where notes separated by octaves sound similar, sharing the same name like C4, C5. Think of it as a helix rising in height but circling back to the same chroma.
And chroma perception fades at high frequencies.
Generally, yes. Above about 5000 Hertz, the octave similarity weakens, though tone height continues to increase.
What about the missing fundamental? Hearing a pitch that isn't physically there.
Yes. Periodicity pitch or virtual pitch, a classic phenomenon. If you play harmonics like 200, 300, 400 Hertz, you perceive a pitch at the fundamental 100 Hertz, even if 100 Hertz is absent.
Why? Is it distortion again?
No, it's different. It works at much lower levels than combination tones, and evidence points to central processing. Your brain figures out the underlying pattern, the common fundamental frequency, even if it's missing. It's like pattern recognition.
Amazing. The brain just fills it in.
It does. Various models try to explain it, like template matching or finding the best harmonic fit. It shows how constructive perception is.
And timbre. What makes a violin sound different from a trumpet playing the same note?
Timbre is that quality beyond pitch and loudness. It depends heavily on the steady-state spectral features, the balance of harmonics, which creates brightness or richness. But also crucial are the dynamic characteristics, the attack, how the sound starts and decay, how it fades. A piano's sharp attack is very different from a flute's gentle onset. That's a huge part of timbre.
Okay, we've covered the building blocks, but how do we navigate the real world full of sounds, especially understanding speech? This raises an important question. How do we use two ears effectively and process something as complex as speech?
This brings us to binaural and spatial hearing. Having two ears gives significant advantages. Our differential sensitivity for both intensity and frequency is better binaurally.
We're just better at detecting small differences with two ears.
Yes, and it's more than just loudness summation. There's a genuine neural advantage. This is crucial for auditory scene analysis, ASA, how we perceptually sort out complex sound mixtures into meaningful streams, like picking out one voice in a crowd.
Using Gestalt principles, like vision.
Exactly. Proximity and similarity sounds close in time. Frequency, location, or timbre tend to get grouped. Think of alternating high and low tones. If they're close in frequency, they fuse into one stream, M-A-B-E-B. If far apart, they segregate into two streams, A-A.
Baby. And common fate, things changing together belong together.
Right. If different frequency components start, stop, or modulate together, we group them as coming from a single source.
This helps us figure out where sounds are. Localization.
Yes. We distinguish localization, perceiving sound sources out there, from lateralization, perceiving sounds inside the head, usually with headphones. Though modern virtual auditory space, VAS, using individual head-related transfer functions, HRTFs, can create remarkably realistic externalized sound over headphones.
How do we localize the interaural differences, ITDs and ILDs?
Those are the primary cues. ITDs, interaural time differences, are key for low frequencies. Sound arrives slightly earlier at the closer ear. Max delay is around 660 microseconds. ILDs, interaural level differences, are key for high frequencies. The head casts an acoustic shatter, making the sound quieter at the far ear. This difference can be up to 20 dBs for high frequencies.
So time for lows, level for highs.
Yeah.
How accurate are we?
Most accurate directly in front, generally good below 1,000 Hz using ITDs and above 4,000 Hz using ILDs. The mid-range, 2 to 4 kilohertz, is toughest for pure tones.
But better for complex sounds.
Yeah.
Broadband advantage.
Much better. Broadband sounds provide multiple cues, ITDs, ILDs across different frequencies, plus those pentaspectral cues. The brain integrates all of it. The balance between ITD and ILD importance is called the trading ratio.
Can we judge distance too?
Yes, using cues like the direct to reverberant energy ratio, direct sound drops off faster than reverb, changes in spectral shape. High frequencies attenuate more with distance, and for close sources, even low-frequency ILDs.
And the precedence effect, dealing with echoes.
Crucial. The precedence effect, or Haas effect, means the perceived sound will be dominated by the earlier arriving signal. We hear the location of the first wavefront, suppressing the perception of echoes.
It makes rooms sound less echoey than they physically are.
Exactly. It involves localization dominance and discrimination suppression. It allows us to focus on the direct sound, essential for clarity, especially for speech in reverberant spaces.
And the MLD binaural masking level difference, using phase differences.
Right. The MLD is the improvement in detecting a signal and noise when the signal or noise has different phase relationships at the two ears. It's largest for low frequencies, up to 15 dBs, allowing the brain to effectively cancel out the noise and hear the signal better. Related is the BILD, binaural intelligibility level difference, for speech understanding a 3-6 dB advantage typically.
Okay, let's focus on speech itself, the ultimate auditory challenge. How do we produce and perceive it?
Speech production involves the vocal folds creating a source sound, which is then filtered by the vocal tract, throat, mouth, nose. The shape of the tract creates resonances called formants, which define vowel sounds. Consonants involve constrictions. For stops, like PTK, cues like the F2 transition into the following vowel help signal the place of articulation. For fricatives, like SF, the continuous turbulent noise is key.
Is speech processed more on one side of the brain? Dichotic listening.
Often, yes. Studies typically show a right ear advantage, REA, for speech sounds presented dichotically, different sounds to each ear simultaneously. This suggests specialization of the left hemisphere for processing rapid, complex acoustic cues typical of speech.
What about categorical perception? Hearing sounds in distinct buckets.
Yes, we perceive continuous acoustic variations, like voice onset time between ba and pa, as discrete categories. There's a sharp perceptual boundary. Interestingly, this isn't unique to speech. It seems to be a more general auditory mechanism for dealing with continuous input, also found for non-speech sounds and in animals.
What acoustic factors affect intelligibility?
The long-term average speech spectrum, LTAS, shows speech energy is strongest around 500 Hz, dropping off at higher frequencies. Speech intelligibility's psychometric functions show how understanding improves with signal-to-noise ratio, SNR. Frequencies critical intelligibility improves significantly as bandwidth increases, especially including frequencies up to around 3000 Hz.
What about interruptions? Can we understand chopped-up speech?
Miller and Licklider's work showed intelligibility depends on the interruption rate. Slow rates are bad if they remove whole words. Very fast rates are better, as we get glimpses and can piece it together, showing speech's redundancy.
Redundancy helps a lot, non-acoustic factors.
Hugely. Redundancy makes speech robust. Knowing the topic, the speaker, or the limited set of possible words, like digits, makes understanding much easier than for unpredictable nonsense syllables. Context is key.
And they're models trying to explain how we recognize words.
Many models. Analysis by synthesis suggests we internally simulate production. General auditory approaches focus on basic auditory learning. The Logogen model proposes word detectors, logogens, that activate based on incoming evidence. The cohort model suggests we activate all words starting with the initial sounds and progressively narrow it down. The trace model is connectionist with interacting layers for features, phones, and words.
Can we measure expected intelligibility acoustically?
Yes, metrics like the Articulation Index, AI, or the related Speech Intelligibility Index, SII, try to predict intelligibility based on the audible speech spectrum and the background noise level across different frequency bands.
Wow, what an absolutely incredible journey. Okay, let's try and put it all back together. We went from basic sound physics waves, intensity, impedance,
Right, the raw materials.
through the outer and middle ears, clever mechanics, that impedance matching.
Overcoming that huge air-to-fluid barrier.
Into the inner ear, the cochlea, with its traveling wave, the amazing hair cells doing transduction, and that active cochlear amplifier.
Turning mechanical wiggles into electrical signals and even boosting them.
Then tracking those signals up the auditory nerve and through the brain's pathways, seeing how timing, place, and binaural cues are processed.
Building that auditory map, maintaining tonotopy, extracting location.
And finally, into perception, how we measure loudness and pitch, deal with masking, group sounds using ASA, localize things, and understand the incredibly complex signal of speech.
Gelfand's work really ties it all together, showing how physics, physiology, and psychology combine to create our experience of hearing.
What's fascinating here is just how incredibly adaptive and, well, resilient our auditory system is, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's constantly doing this complex analysis, filtering, amplifying, interpreting, mostly without us consciously thinking about it, pulling meaning from the noise.
And thinking about Gelfand's point that new findings occasionally disprove the laws of the past. That's a powerful thought. If we connect this to the bigger picture, given the brain's plasticity and how much we're still learning, what could this mean for the future?
It's exciting to consider. Could we see breakthroughs in hearing restoration that go beyond just amplification? Maybe leveraging neural plasticity in new ways?
Or even creating entirely new forms of auditory perception, pushing beyond the biological laws we currently understand. What might that even look like?
Exactly. The science is constantly moving. Our understanding today might seem rudimentary in 50 years. It really prompts you to think about the untapped potential within our own sensory systems and the brain's ability to adapt.
A truly provocative thought to end on. There's clearly so much more to discover about this fundamental sense. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the science of hearing. Until next time, keep listening deeply.